Hi there again, and thanks for coming back for episode 2 of our Unit 6 in Ag Sales, handling objections and dealing with resistance. And so let's get to our 4 types of objections and then how to handle these things as we've talked about through the video to this point. 4 types of objections that you might get. Number 1 is a simple, I don't need your product. And it could be one of or a combination of the 3 reasons for objections that we stated in episode 1. You probably have some informational problems out there. So I would really encourage you, polish up on your features and benefits. Make sure that you clearly understand them. You may need some illustrations, whether it's demonstrations or some testimonials or something like that they could actually see it in play, because at this point they're not seeing that there's a need for that. You've kind of missed the boat on establishing a need altogether, and they may actually truly not need the product. You may have selected something incorrect altogether, and so identify your needs. You didn't identify the needs appropriately. They may need a product, but not necessarily the product that you're pitching to them. Next is the I guess I need it, but not right now type of objection, and oftentimes this is coupled with some passive resistance as well. Occasionally, maybe a stall tactic is kind of putting you off. So, really have solid information ready. Be ready to revisit your cost-benefit analysis, maybe your key features and benefits. Have very clear product and customer knowledge. Do some probing questions, especially some trial closes in here, because that may uncover why they think they don't need it at this point in time. And why maybe they don't necessarily understand how it fits for them. So that's the I guess I need it, but not right now objection. The next is the I don't want it. This is the hardest hitting one of the 3 because you could have done really an outstanding job through the entire sales process, and you just get the I don't want it. And there's usually 2 reasons for the I don't want it objection. Is they're not motivated to buy, and might not ever be motivated to buy. They just kind of strung you along. They may understand the benefits and agree that it would work, but they don't ever think that they could do it. So usually these are really, really hard. So go back to your customer needs, re-explore them, probe a little bit better, and see if, again, you've misevaluated your customer in some form or fashion to where you got the I don't want an objection. Frankly, if you've done a great job preparing and selecting the right message, selecting the right product, the right service to position with your customer, and you've done your customer work, prospect work like we've talked about in prior sections of this course, hopefully you don't get the I don't want it very often. Hopefully you've set the sale up appropriately so you don't have that objection come forward, because it is the hardest hitting one. The last one is the simple I can't afford it objection. They may not understand the return on investment. They may not be aware of financing options. So you may need to demonstrate to them how those things work, backed up with proper information, or be able to walk them clearly through the financing process so that they understand that they in fact can afford it if you've done your homework appropriately. So those types of things, those 4 things are really account for the vast majority of the objections you're likely to get. Now, you say, well, when should I just quit? Customers sometimes are just going to be unwilling to tell you why they're not going to buy. And some of them just genuinely don't need your product. You're not going to make a sale all the time. So don't get that impression when you go out there is if you have done great in this course and you've got a great product, and there are many, many great ones out there, many excellent companies with awesome things in agriculture to sell for customers to buy. Some customers just aren't going to buy. You're going to have those days. So, but be really careful not to alienate a customer that tells you no, that you get to a situation where there's an impasse and there's not going to be a sale. They just simply don't need your product at that point in time. It's not a good fit. It's not a good time for them. They maybe can't afford it, whatever it might be. But don't get upset, don't get discouraged, and don't ruin any possible future chances. Always ask for the opportunity to come back with a different opportunity or a different product at another time. Can you prepare for them? Again, like I mentioned prior, 70 to 80% of the objections that you're going to get should be able to be anticipated. So prepare for them. Put them in your pre-call plan so that you have rehearsed and you're ready for that objection, so that you know that it's coming and you're prepared and ready to answer. So how do you deal with them? First things first, if you get an objection, handle it when it comes up. Save for the price. I wouldn't necessarily always handle a price objection right as it comes up, especially if it's early. One of the things that, and it'll sound like a diversion tactic, and it's really not, but you really want to focus on demonstrating value. It's important to understand that you're not always going to have the cheapest product. In fact, it rarely happens that you have the cheapest product. And so if you get a price objection, which is also very common, you want to make sure and underscore the value that is in the product. And I'll give you a really good example. And I don't want to alienate my fans that have equipment preferences other than John Deere. But I think we can all understand that John Deere equipment is not the cheapest one that you're going to purchase all the time. So why do they have a huge market share? Is their company has done a great job in underscoring and selling their product on value, which is different than price. So that's kind of a very good example on how to handle that objection. Every other objection except for price, handle directly. If they have an objection on quality, handle it directly, right then and there. If they have an objection on how it would be used, handle it right then and there. The price, be very cautious about to time it out, handling it appropriately. Accept these objections as valid, deal with them seriously. I mentioned that before. Even if it's kind of crazy sounding, it may not sound crazy to the prospect, so make sure that you handle it right there. And probably most importantly on this slide is don't argue with the customer, even if they are absolutely wrong. You create a lose-lose situation. It gets uncomfortable for the customer or prospect, and it's, of course, looks very bad on your part. So don't create that lose-lose situation. If a customer gets a little bit high-strung and starts to argue with you, that's the time to kind of be politely finding a way to close the sale, talk them down a little bit, drop the temperature, and look for a way to ask to come back another time. You may have just caught them on a bad day. So try one of the following. You maybe accept blame for misrepresenting something or upsetting them, but always try and help the customer save face, whether that's blaming the situation or blaming yourself. And anticipate and answer possible objections during your presentation so that you don't frustrate a customer, which sometimes happens. So be careful with that argumentative situation. So best practices here. First things first, and I cannot underscore this enough, is listen, listen, listen. Be very careful in listening to customers as they're speaking to you, and make note of what they say so that you hear them appropriately. When they state an objection, a great tool is what we call restating the objection. If they give you an objection that they don't think it's going to work, you say, let me understand this properly. So you don't necessarily think that this auto steer program is going to work well for you. Is that correct? That shows the customer that you're listening very intently. It clarifies the objection. If they're getting a little bit emotional, that may give them a chance to take a breath and pause and come down a little bit. And then also sometimes you'll get them to clarify what the objection is a little bit more. And they may not actually have the objection that they're giving you. It may be a different objection that they just misworded. So that's a great tool. And last on the row here is agree with the customer but not the objection. You don't want to reinforce to a customer that their objection is correct because you will cement that in their mind that they are correct and your product won't work for them, or your service won't work for them, or your idea is a silly one for your group as a leadership speaker. So you want to agree with the customer that there's a valid reason to have an objection. Just don't agree with the objection. Be careful with that, especially on price. Don't say, hey, I understand that you think that this is a high-priced product. and it is. Don't say that. That's going to reinforce to them that they can't afford it. Sometimes you need to ask for more information. Continue that discussion, clarify the objection basis, and then finally, just simply handle the objection. Be ready to move. So, the techniques, you can use the feel, felt, found technique. This is common in a lot of sales textbooks, especially when you get emotionally charged objections. Have a very empathetic response. And especially when you're dealing with I's and S's, the I's that talk a lot, the S's that are more quiet, and a little bit more reserved, is you need to, empathize with them quite a bit, so that you can get to an understanding. Sometimes there's the objection behind the objection, so it takes you a little bit of time to uncover, and a customer may be leading you down the wrong path. So back to that clarification concept that I was talking about in a prior slide, is try and get to that objection behind the objection. Turn the objection into a selling point. So agree that the objection is valid, demonstrate how that actually turns into a benefit for them. That's a great technique to really, and then if you do that effectively, I would be ready to ask for the sale right then and there. If you are able to take an objection, for example, we go back to our speaking about using auto steer, and they have an objection about how it might work. And then you come back with a really key feature and benefit and say, hey, understand that you're not exactly sure how this works. Here, let me explain how this works in more detail, and then drive the point home and how much it's going to gain them in time and efficiency. And once you get the agreement of that, then it's a good time to ask to go for the close right then and there. It's an aggressive tactic, but sometimes that's a great point to just jump right to a close. You could also counter with a question. That puts the objection aside for a minute and allows you to ask for more clarity, which may actually uncover or help you discover more opportunities. You can agree when it's appropriate, and I would say this carefully. They may be right when it is too expensive, and you may know that. And if in fact you've gotten to this part in the sales process and you're confident that they can't afford it, you might need to agree with them in order to understand that that's maybe not the correct product for them. So show them that you understand your product and service is not perfect, because none of us have those. And not everything is going to be a great fit for them. So you have to be humble enough to agree when it's an appropriate time. Again, agreeing with the customer, but not the objection. But also deny when it's appropriate. So be careful that you do that when you do this, to listen and restate to make sure that you hear things correctly. Provide a clear and confident evidentiary response, firm, tactful, but make sure to not insult their intelligence at this point in time and kind of call them silly. And then, of course, you've got a whole category of things that are irrational. I've listed a number of them here. They may not think rationally or logically. Sometimes emotions cause objections not to make a whole lot of sense. They may be kind of flying off the handle a little bit. They may be simply unresponsive, so they may just refuse to answer or offer any explanation, or unwilling to share reasons. They just get a little bit high-strung. They may say things that are completely irrelevant to the situation or the product. They may start trying to rationalize some things that are totally incorrect or not even associated with your product or service or you, because they're probably trying to conceal something that they're not comfortable with. They may hop from objection to objection and not even give you the chance to clear the objection. So they're kind of blowing off steam, so to speak. These irrational things, you sometimes just have to let a customer calm down a little bit. And here's where I would go back to probably asking for some clarification and making sure that you're listening very carefully. So some take-home messages here with regard to handling objections. Plan and anticipate them. I cannot stress that enough. Think about what objections are likely to come up. If you know your customer well, or your prospect well enough, you're likely to know what their objections are going to be. and if they are technically objections, if they're questioned, or if there are rational objections. Again, handle them when they come up, except for price. Clarify the objection to make sure you understand if you're not completely clear, and then use the appropriate technique. So this way, I think we've armed you with a number of different tools, information through this section to be able to hopefully be ready to deal with objections as you encounter them out there in the sales and leadership venue. It takes time. Some of you will do it more naturally than others, and some of you it will be kind of clunky, but you'll get through it, and just be ready for them because they're going to come. And probably at this point in time, you've had a few of them or offered some yourself. It just takes a little time to recognize them and then how you clear them effectively. Thanks for tuning into this section. I hope it was helpful.